Have you ever spent weeks teaching your dog the same command, only to feel as though they had forgotten everything the moment you stepped outside? At home, they come when you call. They sit. They wait patiently. Everything seems to be going exactly as planned. Then you open the front door. Suddenly, it's as if you've brought home a completely different dog. You call their name. Nothing. You ask them to sit. No response. You repeat the command again. Still nothing. At that moment, it's easy to believe your dog is being stubborn or distracted or simply choosing not to listen. And that's exactly where most owners begin looking for the problem. But what if the problem isn't your dog's willingness to learn? What if it's something much less obvious? Because here's the surprising truth: most dogs aren't failing to learn. They're learning exactly what we've been teaching them, just not what we think we're teaching. That sounds strange at first. After all, when you practice sit, you're teaching sit. When you practice come, you're teaching come. It seems obvious, but your dog experiences every training session very differently from the way you do. We tend to focus on words. Dogs pay attention to everything else. They notice where they are, what you were doing just before the command, how excited they feel, whether you're holding treats, who's nearby, what sounds are in the background. And even tiny details that seem completely meaningless to us can become part of the lesson in their minds. In other words, your dog isn't learning a command in isolation. They're learning the entire situation. And once you understand that single idea, many of the biggest frustrations in dog training suddenly begin to make sense. Why does your dog perform perfectly in the kitchen but ignore the same command in the park? Why do they seem to know exactly what to do one day, then struggle with it the next? Why does repeating a command often make things worse instead of better? The answer isn't that your dog is being difficult. It's that dogs don't naturally separate information the way humans do. Imagine learning to drive a car. Now imagine that every single lesson happened in exactly the same empty parking lot, the same weather, the same instructor, the same route. After weeks of practice, you become confident. Then someone suddenly places you in the middle of downtown traffic during rush hour. Would your skills disappear? No, but using them would become much harder because almost everything around you has changed. For many dogs, that's exactly what happens every day. They aren't refusing to perform. They're trying to figure out whether this completely different situation is even asking for the same behavior. That's why one of the biggest mistakes owners make doesn't even feel like a mistake. You teach a behavior in one place, then you assume your dog has learned it forever. From our perspective, that makes perfect sense. If a child learns what the word chair means, they recognize chairs everywhere: different colors, different sizes, different houses. The concept stays the same. Dogs don't always generalize learning that way. Many dogs first connect a behavior to the environment where they practiced it: the living room, the backyard, a quiet training field. To them, those details are part of the lesson itself. So when you suddenly ask for the same behavior somewhere completely different, your dog may not be thinking, "I don't want to." They may genuinely be wondering, is this the same game? That small difference changes everything, because now the solution is no longer to become louder or stricter or more persistent. The solution is helping your dog discover that the lesson travels with them. The command doesn't belong to your kitchen. It doesn't belong to your backyard. It belongs everywhere. And that understanding is built gradually, not automatically. The owners who make the fastest progress usually aren't the ones who train the longest. They're the ones who slowly introduce new environments, one step at a time. A quiet sidewalk, then a peaceful park, then a slightly busier street, then somewhere with more distractions. Each new place teaches your dog an important lesson that has nothing to do with the command itself. It teaches them that the rules stay the same, even when the world around them changes. And once that starts happening, something remarkable begins to appear. Your dog isn't simply memorizing behaviors anymore. They're beginning to understand them. But just when owners start making progress, many unknowingly introduce another habit that quietly slows everything down. A habit so common that almost everyone has done it without realizing what it teaches their dog. And once you see it, you'll probably never repeat a command the same way again. Repeating a command feels completely natural. After all, that's how we often communicate with other people. If someone doesn't hear us, we simply say it again, maybe a little louder, maybe with a little more emphasis. So when your dog doesn't sit after the first cue, the conversation often sounds something like this: sit, sit, come on, sit, sit. Most owners assume they're making the instruction clearer, but from your dog's perspective, something very different may be happening. Imagine someone teaching you that pressing a button starts a machine. The first time they say, press, you hesitate. Nothing happens. Then they say, press, press, press. Eventually, you touch the button. Over time, what have you actually learned? Not that you should respond to the first word. You've learned that nothing important happens until several words come first. Without meaning to, the teacher has changed the lesson. Dogs learn in much the same way. If every command is followed by another command and another, your dog begins to expect the second or even the third cue before responding. They're not ignoring you. They're waiting for the pattern they've learned. This is one of those mistakes that grows slowly. At first, you barely notice it. Your dog hesitates for half a second, then a second. A few weeks later, they respond only after the second cue. Months later, it feels like they never listened the first time. Many owners believe the behavior has become worse. In reality, the dog may simply be following the rules they've been taught. This is why experienced trainers often pause after giving a cue, not because they're hoping the dog will magically obey, but because they're giving the dog time to think. Remember, your dog isn't constantly translating human language. They're processing movement, smells, sounds, your body posture, their own emotional state. Sometimes what feels like disobedience is simply information overload. And that brings us to another misunderstanding. When a dog doesn't respond, our first instinct is often to assume they understood the command but chose to ignore it. But there is another possibility that's far more common. Your dog may not have been capable of responding in that moment. Think about the last time you tried to concentrate in a crowded airport. Announcements echoed overhead. People walked in every direction. Someone bumped into you. Your phone vibrated. Could you still solve a difficult puzzle? Probably, but not as easily as you could sitting quietly at home. Your knowledge didn't disappear. Your brain simply had fewer resources available. Dogs experience something very similar. When excitement, fear, frustration, curiosity, or arousal become too strong, even familiar behaviors can become difficult to access. This is one of the biggest reasons owners believe their dog is stubborn. At home, your dog sits perfectly. Then a squirrel appears, or another dog walks by, or children start running nearby. Suddenly, the command you've practiced 100 times seems to vanish. It didn't vanish. Your dog's brain simply shifted priorities. Survival and awareness always come before obedience. That's true for every animal, including us. If someone suddenly shouted fire in the middle of an exam, nobody would calmly finish the last page before reacting. Your attention would instantly move somewhere else. Dogs aren't so different. This is why successful training isn't only about teaching behaviors, it's about teaching those behaviors under gradually increasing levels of distraction. Not because distractions are the enemy, but because real life is full of them. Many owners accidentally skip this entire process. Training goes well in calm conditions. Then they expect exactly the same performance in the busiest park in town. To us, that feels like the next logical step. To the dog, it can feel like being asked to solve advanced mathematics on the very first day of school. The goal isn't to avoid distractions forever. The goal is to introduce them one layer at a time. Every successful repetition under slightly more difficult conditions builds confidence. Every impossible situation risks creating confusion instead. And once you begin seeing training this way, another common mistake becomes much easier to understand. It's one that almost every loving owner makes because it feels like encouragement, when in reality, it often teaches something completely different. Encouragement is one of the most important parts of training. Every owner knows that. When your dog does something right, you naturally want them to know they succeeded. You smile, you praise them, you reach out to pet them. Sometimes you even hug them. It feels like the perfect reward. After all, that's how humans often express appreciation. But dogs don't always experience rewards the way we do. One of the biggest surprises in animal learning is that the reward only works if the dog actually finds it rewarding. That may sound obvious, but think about it for a moment. Imagine finishing an important project at work. Your manager smiles and says, "Great job." Instead of giving you the bonus you expected, they hand you a bowl of soup. There's nothing wrong with soup. You might even like soup. But at that moment, it isn't the reward you were working for. The same principle applies to dogs. Some dogs absolutely love physical affection. Others enjoy a quick game. Some are highly motivated by food. Others come alive the moment you throw a toy. The mistake isn't using one particular reward. The mistake is assuming every dog values the same thing. That's why experienced trainers spend as much time discovering what motivates a dog as they do teaching behaviors, because motivation isn't a bonus. It's the engine that drives learning. And there's another detail that's just as important: timing. Dogs live far more in the present moment than we do. For them, a few seconds can completely change what they believe caused the reward. Imagine your dog sits when asked. You pause, put the treats back in your pocket, tell them they're wonderful, take 2 steps forward, then finally hand them the reward. From your perspective, you're rewarding the sit. From your dog's perspective, the reward may have arrived after standing up, or after taking a step, or after looking toward another dog. Small delays can accidentally reinforce completely different behaviors. That's why trainers often say the reward should arrive as close as possible to the behavior you want to strengthen. Not because dogs are impatient, but because their brains are constantly connecting cause and effect. The clearer that connection becomes, the faster learning happens. But here's something equally important. Many owners hear this advice and immediately think, so I should always use treats. Not exactly. Food is an incredibly powerful teaching tool, especially when introducing something completely new. But learning doesn't end there. Imagine a child who receives money every single time they brush their teeth. At first, it works beautifully, but years later, what happens if the payment suddenly stops? The habit may disappear with it. Dogs can develop similar expectations if rewards never evolve. The goal isn't to remove rewards, the goal is to expand them. Over time, praise, play, freedom to explore, continuing the walk, getting to greet another dog, all of these can become meaningful rewards depending on the individual dog and the situation. Reliable behavior isn't built because one reward is used forever. It's built because the dog learns that making good choices consistently leads to good outcomes. Sometimes that's food. Sometimes it's a favorite toy. Sometimes it's simply permission to keep doing something they already wanted to do. This flexibility creates dogs that work confidently in everyday life, not only when they see a treat pouch. And yet, even when owners understand motivation, even when they stop repeating commands, um, even when they practice in different places, there's still one misunderstanding that quietly affects almost every training session. It's also the reason many people believe their dog is being stubborn, when in reality, the dog may be doing exactly what their brain has learned to do.